Hi, everyone. Thanks for patiently waiting for us to start. Hopefully you can all hear me and technology is working on our side tonight. So we'd like to welcome you to our first virtual community session. As you all know, we've had quite a challenging time with COVID-19 and getting out to communities and engaging with community members. So we're really hoping that tonight is a way for us to begin a new process of reaching out to people, of seeing people join and learn and find out more about KMKNO. My name is Crystal Dory, and I am the communications manager for KMK. I often hear, oh, I read your name, I see your name in places, so it's nice, hopefully, for everyone to see a face. We have a lot of departments here at KMKNO and working on a lot of different things. Because there are so many things that our team is working on, what we're trying to do every month is focus on one specific department. So this month is a focus on our archaeology department. You might have seen posts on our Facebook or in any of our messaging or emails that went out that we just launched a new website just before Christmas, migamorights.com. And it has information about all our departments, things that we're working on. We update it regularly. And hopefully it's a place where people can go to get information as well. So tonight with the virtual sessions, you'll see either down at the bottom of the screen, depending on how you logged in, or up on the corner, there's a Q&A button. So in that Q&A button, at any point in time during the presentation tonight, you can ask a question. I'll be monitoring those questions as they come in. And then after our archaeologists do their presentation, we will then start to read through those questions and take those questions from our viewers. So at any point in time, put a question in there. But don't worry, for those family and friends that you know wanted to listen and weren't able to join us tonight, we will actually be recording this session. You may see somewhere on the screen, there's a notification that it is being recorded. And we will post it to our YouTube page, which will be shared on our social media, our Facebook, our website, and all those good places. So hopefully people can access the information that way. We're hoping to have sessions the last week of every month. And we're hoping that you'll be able to join us and find out what the topics are each month as we work through every month of 2021. Another part of reaching out to community members is we are also issuing a newsletter each month. It actually just went out a couple days ago. So if you didn't get it and you want to get it, let us know by going onto our website and filling out the Contact Us form. Send us an email at info@migamorights.com or reach out to us, any of our team, and they will let me know and I'll add you to our list. But the newsletter will also be posted tonight on our website and can be accessed there as well. And special to the archaeology team is a podcast, which you may have seen was just episode 4, actually, was just posted last night. It's called From the Ground Up. So you'll hear a little bit more from the archaeology team there. And we're hoping that in the future, you'll see more podcasts from our team, more videos from our team, and a lot more communication in general on what we're doing and what we're working on. So as I said, this month is focusing on archaeology. And from our archaeology team, we have Dr. Heather McLeod-Leslie, and she gets mad at me when I call her doctor, but she's a doctor and it's really cool. She has been with KMK for 13 years and is our senior archaeologist. And with Heather is Kate McLean. She's our staff archaeologist and she's been with KMK for almost 5 years and she's from Millbrook First Nation. So tonight, Heather and Kate will be providing you with a presentation on what the ARD department does, some of the things they're working on, and as I said, we'll be taking questions from you throughout the presentation. We're hoping to keep it in about an hour. So if we get lots of questions and run out of time, don't worry about it. You can send us your questions. We will always find a way to answer them. And you can also can contact our office, contact our team at any point in time, because we're always happy to talk to community members and answer any questions you have. So without hearing from me any further, I am going to turn it over to Heather. I believe she's going to start us off this evening. So let me just figure out technology, how to take the spotlight off of me and put it on Heather.
Oh dear. Let's not put it on Heather. Let's put it on the PowerPoint. Yes.
Sure. Just give me 1 second, Heather, to bring that up, and I will
Thank you.
absolutely do that. Well, let's see if I can find out where to share this. Because, you know, that would just be simple, wouldn't it?
So Kate and I are going to swap back and forth so people don't have to listen to me too long without a break. We're going to share the presentation back and forth, and then we may swap questions, or whoever is working on a file or on a particular initiative, then we'll address questions after the PowerPoint. And hopefully the PowerPoint will be in the 20 to 30-minute range. There we go. Super. Awesome. Now, because Crystal, you are in command, I'm going to ask you to move through our slides for us. So either I or Kate will just say next slide, please. Okay. So here we go. Next slide, please. Welcome. So KMKNO's Archaeology Research Department has a mandate that it was given by the Assembly. Next slide, please, Crystal. Unless I'm lagging and we've already done it. Looking for slide number 2. Oh, I can't hear you, Crystal. You're muted. There we go.
Sorry about that. I am trying to get to slide number 2 and it does not want to go for some reason.
Well, see, we put a lot of pictures in.
I found it.
Oh, there we go. Super. We put a lot of pictures in because we're going to tell you a story, not ask you to read it for yourself. So yes, the Assembly of Nova Scotia Migamo Chiefs, or the Maalukadijik Sahma, asked the Archaeology Research Division of KMKNO to protect Migamo archaeological burial and sacred sites. And that's a huge mandate, and it involves a lot. So it involves things like development projects and protecting sites from destruction or loss or damage. So development projects can include things like buildings or highways or wharves. Destruction, loss can also happen naturally too, through things like erosion. And we've got some pictures here on this slide. The top picture is from the Mersey system, the very top of the Mersey River, up around Lake Rosignol. And we have a wonderful picture of the late Captain Gerald Toney Sr., who offered wonderful wisdom and guidance, and the G Captain. And they're reviewing a map of proposed development or refurbishment of a hydroelectric system on the river. And then in the lower slides, or the lower pictures, sorry, you'll see in both cases, what you're seeing are ground penetrating radars being used. On the left-hand side at Mulligawatch, the GPR is mounted on a sled, so it can slide across the soil and the snow and so on. On the right-hand side, it's a GPR mounted on what looks like a baby carriage or a stroller at Chapel Island. And what these two tools allow us, or what these tools and these two mountings allow us to do, is to see potential burials or archaeological features without disturbing anything. And so what we get back are images that look kind of like this blue and green and orange and yellow picture in between those two. That's actually an electromagnetic conductivity meter. So it's like a GPR, it just makes different kinds of pictures. So when we're trying to fulfill our mandate of protecting archaeological burial and sacred sites. We're trying to protect them from development, from erosion, also from a lack of understanding about a place and how it should be honored and cared for. So for instance, you know, how burials need to be protected from things like access roads or cottages, or archaeological sites need to be protected from disturbance and the removal of context. So, excuse me, the ARD really does whatever it takes to stand up for the archaeological burial and sacred sites, to keep folks accountable, developers, and to honor those Mi'kmaq values of non-disturbance of burials. It's really, really important that we honor the Mi'kmaq values when we're doing archaeology, and that's what we're here to do. If you can just advance the next slide for me, Crystal. I've got one more slide and then I'm going to hand it over to Kate. So in addition to fulfilling our mandate, which is a big one, at KMK, we also support our team. And so that means we're supporting the consultation department, we're supporting the rights implementation team, and we're supporting community initiatives with respect to their archaeological concerns and their archaeological goals. And I am going to pass it over to Kate to talk a little bit about how we support the consultation department at KMK.
Hi everyone, hope you can all hear me. Really excited to be able to interact with everyone today, and I'm gonna try to be fairly brief with my presentation sections so that we can get on to as many Q&As as we can. Crystal, I'm not sure if I'm lagging or if we're on to the next slide there. Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so working with the consultation department is a really big part of what we do at KMKNO for the ARD. We work with a very large number and a big variety of files to ensure that Mi'kmaq archaeological sites, both known and unknown, are protected. So Heather and I are going to go through a few examples quickly of how we help support the consultation team on a variety of files. So in general, there are three ways the ARD helps support consultation. These are through desktop, field, and boardroom work. So desktop would include all of the reports we review and the research we do to make sure that our consultation team has all of the information that they need. We also do what we call an information request response for other archaeologists. This is sort of like a pre-consultation thing. So what this is that we do a small report for them, for other archaeologists, before they go out to do their archaeological study, which includes Mi'kmaq historical sources and a general summary of traditional information, which is kept vague to protect the information, as well as a statement of the Assembly's standards to ensure that there is more Mi'kmaq content in their background studies and reports. Fieldwork could be a site visit before, during, or after a project, and sometimes it's all three. It's a mix of whatever is needed at the time. Or it could be stopping in during someone else's research, or maybe it's a collaborative project where we, in collaboration with someone else, go out in the field and get some really great archaeology done. And equally important to both of those things is our work in the boardroom, making sure that we're supporting the consultation team in various meetings and ensuring that Mi'kmaq concerns about archaeology are well understood to everyone. The photos on the slides here from the Cape Split Trail development. So you can probably see the little sisters rocks out there. So I'm sure many of you have heard about the trail, and they're adding kind of like a bottom loop to it. So we've, through consultation, have been involved in this project. So we started early on in the planning phase, which allowed the ARD to ensure that the correct archaeological assessments were undertaken by professional archaeologists that were contracted by the proponent that was building the trail. So that's really important that we have input in not only that archaeology gets done, but how the archaeology goes forward. And what methodologies they use, because sometimes Nova Scotia has fairly lax regulations on what sort of archaeology happens, and the Assembly has pretty high standards. We want to make sure that all of the archaeological assessments that are done meet those standards. And during this, they actually had some really cool and interesting finds. And, you know, we were able to take that information and to make sure that the trail wasn't going to have any impact on those going forward. And in the photo here, you see a very large group of socially distant people from earlier in the year. Well, I guess it would be last year now. This is people from not only the ARD, but GIS teams, our lands team, our forest team, and this is kind of doing a final field walk of the trail. You know, we have to work together as a team to find the best path forward, which includes not only archaeology, but species at risk and cultural things. So there's a lot of things that go into this. Anything you want to add there, Heather, before we go forward? Okay, Crystal, move us on. So another example of a consultation file that we work on is with Nova Scotia Power and their hydroelectric systems, with their plans to refurbish them. So we have ongoing work at the Rep Cove system, Lake Mulgrave, Tusket system, Mersey system, and soon to be the Black River Hydro system. So these are a different sort of file, as these projects are extremely large in scope, and some of them will last for more than a decade from start to finish. So this means that there are much different challenges to overcome than a smaller type project like we saw in the last example, with so many different components to the project, with ERD and others with KMKNO, along with community members, often hold monthly meetings to discuss the plans and kind of the studies that they have done already, and the studies that they're going to do in the future. So as always at KMK, we work with a multidisciplinary team to make sure we cover things from all angles. We're only one piece of a larger picture, but archaeology is an important one to get right. You know, you can't put something back in once it's disturbed. So in these photos, you can see this very long orange fence. And we had that put up so that the construction team knows where the archaeologically sensitive areas are. So that's kind of like a step we've taken to prevent accidents from happening on site. Another thing that we've kind of started to do is in the middle photo there, you can actually see some archaeological training happening by Boreas Heritage Consulting. And what they're doing there is not training, but letting the construction crew know what to look for, just in the chance that they come across anything, but also why it's important to respect the archaeological boundaries, not just from like a scientific archaeological point of view, but also from a Mi'kmaq cultural one as well. And then on the left, you'll see our community liaison, Tanya Johnson-McVicker, out on a site visit with myself on the Mersey River system recently. I think that's it.
Okay, shall we get to the next slide? There we go. Peggys Cove. Now that's a hot topic right now. So this, of course, is another file that our consultation team is dealing with right now. But the ARD has archaeology-specific involvement. So our role with this place actually started. Kate mentioned that we have a pre-consultation info request process in place. So right now, we don't have formal and direct consultation on archaeological permits in Nova Scotia. And that's regulated at the provincial level of government. So we don't have a direct consultation with respect to the archaeological permitting, but when the provincial crown grants a permit to an archaeologist for a project, they're encouraged to reach out to us to through this pre-consultation information request process. So on the Peggys Cove project, and Kate takes care of 99.99999% of the info requests that we receive from archaeologists on these projects. So she had received the information request back in October of 2019. And as part of that info request, we provide you know, some input based on the wonderful historical documentation that our senior research officer has compiled over decades and decades of work, because we want to make sure that, you know, the historical record of Migamo use and occupation formulates part of the background study. We also ensure that the archaeologists are aware of you know, the archaeological sites that have been recorded in the general vicinity. And we make a general statement about what we understand from the traditional use knowledge that we have access to. We do not distribute that information because we have no right. The intellectual property rights for the traditional use information rests with the knowledge holders, and we respect that. But what we do is we take a look and we try and give them an idea of some of the things that archaeologically they may encounter as a result of what we know has happened there in the past with respect to traditional use. Because not everything leaves an archaeological trace. So, but we do provide, you know, kind of a snapshot picture, but again, nothing specific. So we also, as Kate said, make clear the assembly standards for archaeological practice. And we encourage the archaeologists to share copies of their reports with us, but they are also bound by the legislation and the contracts with their clients, so the developers. So in this particular instance, we did not hear another thing on this project at the ARD until late last year, a couple months ago, right before Christmas, really. And as soon as we became aware of it, we asked to have a copy of the archaeological report that was completed after that info request was fulfilled. And so as soon as we had received it, then we're able to look at the what the archaeologists had recommended and what we were hearing from Develop Nova Scotia. And we identified some concerns and some inconsistencies right away. And so we were able to bring that to the meeting that the consultation department had. And so we were able to speak to the very specific archaeological details, I guess, that we're seeing in the report. And I will say that we had identified problems between what the developer was doing and what their archaeological consultant had recommended and the Crown had approved. And that meant that the archaeological regulator for the province, even though we don't have consultation on the permits, they too were concerned. So we were able in December, when we had that first meeting, to identify the concerns and the problems, and an additional archaeological effort was undertaken immediately. So the jury's still out on the project, but the archaeology, you know, we're active, we're involved, and we are involved in supporting the consultation department on the archaeological concerns. So the pictures I have up here are actually courtesy of the archaeological consultant doing that work. And rather than showing the lighthouse, I just wanted to use these pictures to show you the areas where archaeologists are concerned with things like the archaeological remains from people harvesting food. Those are lots of blueberry plants, I believe, in the foreground. The bottom left-hand picture and the right-hand picture of the barrens, they both show bedrock outcroppings, which the archaeologists will examine for potential petroglyphs. So, you know, it's not just about putting roadways and viewing platforms and parking lots in. It's about, if there's development in this area, we want to know the archaeological scope of what ancestors have left behind, not just where the roadways and viewing platforms are. So the archaeological examination extends to the whole study area. So I think that's all I've got for you on Peggys Cove, but another example, if we could, super, thanks Crystal. Another example of how we support the consultation department, there is a conversation happens between the Migamo and Parks Canada. And so through the consultation files, the many files in the Parks Canada jurisdictions, be they Ketchikan or Grand Pré National Park or National Historic Site, Cape Breton Highlands National Park, Chignecto, and so forth, we have developed what we're calling a collaborative archaeology team with Parks Canada. And it really has proven to be a wonderful model for how to work together on archaeological concerns. So this particular area, these pictures are from Ketchikan. So when we're talking about Parks Canada, they're regulating a very specific area in Nova Scotia. So in the other pictures on Peggys Cove, we were in the provincial archaeological regulatory jurisdiction. When we're in national parks and national historic sites, we're in the federal jurisdiction. So in the federal jurisdiction, we deal with Parks Canada. And so we've developed this great approach. And so this collection of pictures is actually a wonderful example of what is possible when we work alongside the regulator for everybody's concerns. And what we have here are Migamo community members, elders, youth, future archaeologists participating in the archaeological protection from development impact of Migamo sites in Ketchikan. And these pictures are from just this past summer. So on the top left, I see my good friend, Captain Jeff Purdy, who is a counselor in Acadia First Nation and also a captain in the Grand Council. We have some fantastic youth getting hands-on and learning about what archaeology is like, and having that personal connection with the ancestors who lived here through these projects. And down the bottom in the center, Sarah Beanlands of Boreas Heritage had shown us this in a meeting with Parks Canada, and I asked for a copy of it, and she very kindly obliged. This is a drawing by the young man in the blue shirt in the pictures on the right. And it says, "I love archaeology." So, you know, it's an unforgettable experience, and it's an opportunity to participate. And it's an important relationship to build. If we could just go to the next slide quickly, Crystal, please. This is another positive aspect of the collaborative archaeology relationship that we have with Parks Canada. There we go. So this collaborative model that we have allows us to have real-time input into how archaeological assessment happens in the Parks Canada jurisdictions. So this is in Ketchikan National Historic Site National Park. And through this collaborative relationship, the Archaeology Research Division, we have those detailed talks about methods and where tests happen and how they happen. And it includes, you know, that collaborative team approach includes both the regulator's perspective as well as a Migamo perspective, wanting to understand how the landscape has changed over time. So the top picture, I've got an arrow pointing to a site that was recorded in preparation for development of a multi-use trail, and Kate was on site for a lot of the preliminary work. And through Kate's observations, she looked at the proposed archaeological testing plan and made some recommendations about additional areas where she had identified through her field assessment. She'd like to see some archaeological testing. And in this particular area, there had been no previously planned testing. So the archaeological consultants went in and did the testing per the plan that was collaboratively developed and identified a site in an area that originally, without the ARD involvement, would not have been tested. And they recorded a new site. And that site was only represented by, now they were just doing shovel testing, but was only represented by a few flakes. But it was really significant, because it was in a place where nobody expected there to be a site. Now, the archaeological consultants were given the latitude by the regulator, Parks Canada, in that area, to really look at why there was a site there. And so there's an animation playing, and it shows kind of the flooding of the landscape. So if we think about when the glaciers receded, that all of those waters would have melted off, the lakes in Kedge used to be much higher. And so although today it's in the middle of a dry area, several thousand years ago, perhaps 8,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, it was a shoreline. And so this, not only is it an opportunity through this collaborative model to have participation in the field work, but it's also an opportunity to reshape how archaeology gets done, and which improves our understanding. It improves our understanding of Migamo use and occupation. And that's what's happening here. It's opening up a whole new opportunity for understanding Migamo use and occupancy and the many different landscapes that Migamo ancestors witnessed and landscape changes. So I think I'll pass it back over to Kate now.
Yeah, I should unmute myself. That'll help. So underwater standards for submerged landscapes are a major concern that we've been working on here recently. The province of Nova Scotia doesn't have clear or strong guidelines on the type of underwater archaeology work that should be undertaken in the province, and they primarily focus on shipwrecks right now. So the landscapes of Mi'kma'ki have changed vastly throughout the 13,000 years or more that people have been here. And this is a series of maps on your screen here that kind of shows that. So if you, I don't know how well you can see it, but if you look in closely, you can see that right now Sable Island is just a tiny little sliver, but in the past, it was almost half the size of Nova Scotia. It was way bigger than Cape Breton was. And you can also see that PEI and Nova Scotia were connected at one point. So we can see that much of the land would have been in existence when our ancestors were here is now underwater. So we feel that this is a very important thing that needs the same level of protection as sites on land. To date, there have been very few, almost no sites found offshore, but that's more likely to be because no one was looking there. There have been artifacts, usually dragged up by fishing vessels. So we at KMKNO are working hard to develop standards that will address this type of site that aren't currently well protected. This is another area where governance and self-determination can work to strengthen the protection and well-being of our sites. I'm going to go to the next slide, Crystal.
It's all right. That's going to slow us down if I talk while muted. We got to flip along here a little faster. Us archaeologists talk too much. Mostly I talk too much. Okay, what we also do is we support not just the consultation department, but the rights implementation team by doing research into use and occupancy. And that includes things like understanding where hearths were and what people were harvesting. So archaeology gives us kind of this detailed data. And so part of what we do as the Archaeology Research Division is we take a look at all this information that's come from archaeology across the province, and we're trying to weave together a better understanding of use and occupation, which includes things like what animals were harvested, what fish were harvested, what plants were harvested, how they were used, what seasons they were harvested. And that all can come from the archaeological sites. So here we've got a picture of someone excavating a hearth feature in this, oops, you can't see when I point, top corner. It's kind of darker soil. So that's from the burning of the hearth. And on the right-hand side, we've got pictures of shells, of shellfish that were harvested. And you can tell the season and the age and so on. It gives us information about how people manage the resources. And in the bottom, there's a birch bark basket of blueberries, but on the right is a charred blueberry seed that has been recovered from the soils from a hearth feature, and they're microscopic. So these are the kinds of things that we look at and we work on for the rights implementation team. Next slide, please.
So part of our collaborative work that we do with others is conducting research. So an example of this research is our Tapu Bathi LiDAR project that we're doing with NSCC's College of Geographic Sciences. They're using a special type of imaging tool that allows them to get very detailed digital maps of the shoreline and land under shallow waters. And we can use this information to help us predict where former shorelines would have been and where people may have lived and fished along them. So we're hoping to ground truth these shoreline predictions sometime later this year or next, COVID permitting. We would do this by a variety of methods, maybe using core samples or getting out and diving to collect that kind of vital information. We're hoping to trial a variety of methods over the next few years to see what works best in Nova Scotia. And in this photo, you'll see the results from the LiDAR for the Bredor area, Bredor Lakes area. And also on the bottom there, this photo is of me before joining KMKNO. I was working in Germany a few years ago on a site, and this is a different type of imaging system called a sub-bottom profiler. And it does exactly what it sounds like it does. It lets you see under the bottom of the seafloor for larger items. So here we're looking for basically a timber barrier structure, which was built by some Vikings, which is super cool. So that's it. Next one.
Next slide. Okay. So we also support the development of Migamo governance systems on archaeological matters. So in this particular slide, you see the Culture, Heritage, and Archaeology Strategic Plan and also the Migamo language version of it. That plan was released in 2015 by the Assembly. They reviewed and approved it, and it highlights 5 key priorities and objectives for the nation in Nova Scotia. That document has actually been taken up by other governments, and you see it reflected in Nova Scotia's Culture Action Plan with their commitment to Migamo culture, and we've got on the top right the Assembly's Principles of Migamo Ancestral Remains Protocols. This actually, there was an MOU in 1999 that ensured that no archaeologist, it was signed by the provincial regulator and the National Museum, the Assembly, the Grand Council, and everyone agreed that archaeologists would not disturb Migamo burials unless Migamo asked for it, asked for the archaeologists to do so. So burials will only ever be disturbed accidentally. They'll never be purposefully dug. So the ancestral remains protocols get triggered if this accidentally happens. And what the protocols do is they, give people external to the nation a touch point, a contact, and a process to follow. When we get a contact at the ARD, that triggers an internal process that involves the portfolio lead chief for culture, heritage, and archaeology, the chief or chiefs of the closest community or communities, the Grand Council, and traditional ceremony keepers. And it ensures that anything related to Migamo ancestral remains happens under Migamo leadership. And it ensures that the solutions to this accidental situation are Migamo solutions. And we're also in the process of, and also as part of our community support, you see the bottom image, Migamo Archeological Protocols. And Kate's going to go into a little more detail on Migamo Archeological Protocols.
Yeah, so we also work hard to support communities in what they need as well. This photo is from a community session at the Gespawag Archeological Protocols sort of sessions. As Heather mentioned here, these were something that Acadia led the development of with participation from Bear River and Annapolis Valley First Nation members. So Acadia basically asked us to help them kind of facilitate and develop real world scenarios for them to work through their thoughts and needs in response to all of the archaeology that was planned to happen in the area in the upcoming years. So really there's three main parts of the document. The first one is the fundamental principles, which are the values that the community felt were most important to remember about archaeology. The second is the protocols, which is how the community would like to see archaeology done and communicated back to them. And third is what we call the standards. These are the technical nitty-gritty methods and details for other archaeologists. The ARD helped the community translate their ideas and concerns into concrete actions and requirements to be followed by archaeologists. So although these were developed by those communities, the Assembly has endorsed them. And we would like to take this document around to each of the communities, perhaps through a virtual community session, such as this, to discuss how this document can be modified or changed to suit each individual community's needs. So stay tuned for those upcoming dates.
All right, and community support, that's something else that the ARD does. So Kate just talked a little bit about supporting Acadia and Bear River and Annapolis Valley in ensuring that the ideas and the concerns we were able to translate into something that the archaeologists could understand. And another thing that we do is archaeological capacity building. So recognizing that not everybody wants to be an archaeologist, but they want to understand more about archaeology or have opportunities for involvement, and that takes a little bit of training and so on. Here are some pictures. The top left is from a workshop that we held in October for UINR's guardians, the land guardians. I think CMM calls their team the land keepers. And actually, we've received a request from CMM to offer their land keepers the same training that we offered in this workshop. So that was a 2-day workshop. We had a day in the classroom to learn about archaeological stuff. And then the next day we went to a site and took a look around and were able to identify some things, see what it feels like in the real world. But all of those archaeological artifacts that were sitting on the surface, we left there to honor the place. Bottom left corner was a young lady who was a high school student, actually. really interested in becoming an archaeologist. And so she spent several summers working with us in the ARD, and we were able to get her involved in all sorts of projects, reporting, research, and working with other archaeological projects as well. And in the center is a picture of one of our former colleagues participating in fieldwork with the ARD. This is on Chapel Island, and we were doing just a survey, a look around and documentation. We have put members of the consultation team to work sifting things as well. So we're trying to build capacity where people want and how they want for the many goals they have.
So I just want to briefly touch on another thing that we do is participate in the DBERT Standards Review Committee. So DBERT is the oldest archaeological site in the Maritimes. It's about 13,000 years old. So it's very important both archaeologically and also culturally. So the DBERT Standards Review Committee does a large variety of things. They make specific standards for the area. They review and approve or not permit applications and reports. We do a yearly training session, which is in the photo there, and offer in-field support. To learn more about DBERT and the Standards Committee, you can check out our podcast, From the Ground Up. Our most recent episode focuses on DBERT. It's with the Standards Committee and CRM group, as well as Gerald Glode. It's really fantastic episodes. You guys should really check it out.
Okay, so another thing the ARD is doing is trying to help support recovering Migamo archaeological heritage back into the nation. It's an unfortunate reality that for centuries there have been private collectors, that is, people taking artifacts from sites. We lose the context when that happens, which means we've lost 90% of what we could have learned. But sometimes those collectors want to give the artifacts back to the Migamo. Sometimes people find something they weren't looking for and they want to give it back to the Migamo. So one of the things that we are working on with the Grand Council is an intake protocol. And so that's an upcoming governance piece to connect with people with private collections and bringing the heritage back to the nation, rightfully so.
So the last thing we're going to touch on today is community participation. We're always very excited to be able to involve community in archaeology. And we look to do this in a number of ways. There's places for everyone of every age and ability. So for example, in our NSBI working groups, we have several elders and knowledge holders that are a key part of our group. And the photos here in the slideshow are part of some work done at Kejimkujik in a different project than the last one we talked about, where we were privileged to bring together park staff, knowledge holders, and the consulting archaeologists to discuss proposed works, hear their thoughts, memories, experiences on the land there, which ultimately altered the way this particular project was going to go forward. But there's also opportunities to work directly with archaeologists, consultants in the field doing excavation or lab work, or being cultural monitor or knowledge holder during the excavation. So if you're interested in participation in any way, please reach out to us and we'll do our best to make sure you can participate in the way that suits you best.
Thank you both for your presentation. I'm actually trying to get my screens back to be where I need them to be so I can see what's going on. And of course, that doesn't want to work nicely for me. There, that's helpful. So thank you both. If I had an applause button, I would push it, but I don't. Maybe I'll work on it for a future session. So for anyone who joined us a few minutes late, there is a Q&A button either down at the bottom of your screen or at the top, depending on which type of device you joined in on. So if you have a question for our archaeology team, please type it in there and we will answer your questions. So we have about 10 minutes, and I'm sure people will be okay if we go a couple minutes over, but we want to try to keep to the hour as much as we can. So I have a few questions. The first one I have here is, what if remains or artifacts are discovered on private property and they do not wish to involve the Mi'kmaq? Is there a process for digging to the halt? And that's from Graham Marshall, a community member.
So if I understand, the question is if there are artifacts on a private parcel, and what can you do? If you have evidence, that could be a picture, okay? If you're able to take a picture. You need to contact either us, and we'll contact the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage, or you can contact the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage directly. If there's active digging, then what we'd like to do is get a stop work order. So if we have evidence, if we have a suspicion that there are artifacts, that's a little more difficult. But ultimately, if it's a private property and it's not a commercial development, chances are that is regulated by municipal government, which is not actually bound by a duty to consult. But we've been reaching out to municipal governments to try and improve their archaeological diligence. Chief Wilbert Marshall is the portfolio lead chief for culture, heritage, and archaeology, and he has done a number of things to encourage and highlight this to municipalities. If it's a private individual and they will allow you to take a picture, or you can get onto their property with their permission to take a picture, we need that evidence. Without it, it is difficult, but ultimately that comes under the provincial regulatory office, but you can contact us if it's a Migamo site, and we will work with you to support you.
And I would like to stress here that it is illegal to knowingly disturb artifacts of any sort. So if you see someone doing this, they are committing a crime. So, you know, it is important that if you can safely take a photo, but if you can't safely take a photo, that's okay. Just make sure that you contact us or Communities, Culture and Heritage and let them know.
Great. Question number 2. What is a flake and why is it significant?
Kate, you want to do that one?
Sure. So when you're making a stone tool, you'll start it with a big rock, like this big. And then the way that you make it is that you actually break small pieces off of it. You can do that with pieces of antler or with another rock. And when you break it down piece by piece, the pieces that aren't useful or as useful anymore are called flakes. They're just little tiny pieces often that kind of break off that you don't want in your end product, like your spear point or whatever. So those are little pieces that come off of the spear point. And they're really important because they are kind of an indicator usually. So when you're making a stone tool, you can sometimes get hundreds or thousands of these flakes. So it's a really good indicator that people were there and people were using the area. And we're more likely to find flakes than we are artifacts, because for every single artifact, there's a couple hundred flakes. So it's just a really good indicator to tell us that there's probably something more there.
Cool, thanks. Another question. I think I might have found an artifact. What should I do with it?
Okay, well, I guess if it was a Migamo artifact, whatever the artifact is, the first thing is don't move it unless it's in jeopardy of being lost. Leave it where it's at, please. Photograph it, take the coordinates. If you have a GPS, that would be great. And then you can either contact us if you have concerns for a Migamo site, or dependent upon which regulatory jurisdiction you're in, if it's Parks Canada or in a provincial jurisdiction, so outside a parks site, that's provincial, and contact the regulator. the reason that we don't want people to remove things is because although artifacts are wonderful and useful and beautiful and amazing, 95% of what we learn about the past comes from the context of that artifact. So if you can leave it be and document it and reach out to an archaeological regulator or an archaeologist who can help you navigate the next steps, that's the ideal.
Thank you. Why do archaeologists only dig 3 feet? Why not deeper?
So archaeologists will dig until they reach what we call, I guess a good term for it is culturally sterile soil. So that means that there aren't going to be artifacts below that level. That'll be like bedrock or something like glacial till. So that's the rock material that moves in with glaciers. So we don't have any evidence of people living here prior to glaciers or bedrock development. So what we do is we try to dig until we get to those, and then we can be sure that there's not going to be artifacts after that. And in Nova Scotia, the soil depth is extremely different. So in some areas, it'll be 10 centimeters down, and some it'll be 5 meters down. Archaeologists can only hand dig about 120 centimeters safely, just as a safety guideline. But if you remember earlier from the DeBert slides, there was that really long auger, the metal piece that you saw, and that auger was about 4 meters long, if I remember correctly. So what they were doing is they were hand augering down past the safety limit to make sure that they hit bedrock. And that's how deep it was in that area, that soil. So archaeologists can go down deeper, and we do want to go down until we get to that level that's considered safe to stop at, because there won't be artifacts past that level.
I just want to add that I'm curious about the 3 feet, because sometimes it's only, as Kate said, this far down until we hit that culturally sterile layer. And sometimes it's a big long way down. So I'm curious about the 3 feet, where that came from. Maybe it was a particular experience on a particular site, but it's only ever defined by the local conditions. So it's going to be different everywhere, how deep we dig. Deep we dig? Yes, deep we dig.
So we're nearing the end of our hour, but we do have a couple more questions that I think would be important to get in there before we close for the evening. This one is, just considering the new infrastructure that will be going on this year in Nova Scotia, an example of that could be as twinning the highways within the province. Is there Mi'kmaq representation at the worksite just in case they discover something? And as maybe building on shorelines, is there Mi'kmaq representation at these work sites as well? There's a note that says, just because we are known to live on the water, as you pointed out, a majority of the artifacts could be submerged.
Right. So what I will say is there isn't necessarily on-site representation with twinning projects and harbor side projects and water side projects. There are some instances where, and Kate spoke about the Nova Scotia Power work that we do. We try always to ensure, and our Migamo community liaison, Tanya Johnson-McVicker, works really hard to make sure that there's Mi'kmaq representation on site on every Nova Scotia Power project. But that's not the usual on the other projects. So this is part of the reason why it's so important that on the archaeology, on consultation, that archaeology is part of that discussion. That said, we always, from the ARD at KMKNO, as well as the entire KMK team, the consultation department, and the rights implementation team, we highlight again and again the importance of having Mi'kmaq involved. This is Mi'kmaq territory. These are unceded lands and waters and resources. And we also promote the capacity building. So we're trying to get Migamo participation in all archaeological projects. We're not there yet, we're working on it. And in terms of non-archaeological representation, it really is per proponent, per project, with the exception right now of Nova Scotia Power, where we do try and consistently have that representation on site. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and all of the highway twinning and stuff like that, they will have archaeological reports done on them that, like Heather said, we participated in the consultation on prior to them going into doing the construction.
And this might be our last question for the evening. Where do artifacts go when they are found? And do the Mi'kmaq have a say in where they go?
Ah, that is a fantastic question. Kate, do you want to take that?
I can start us out and then you can finish us off. Right now, from a provincial legal standpoint, artifacts are supposed to be housed with communities' culture and heritage. Although, as Heather said, we are working on our own protocol to kind of have a methodology that is more reflective of Mi'kmaq communities and what they would like things to where they would like things to be housed at. There we go. Whether that's local museums or with communities themselves. So I think that that's something that we're really thinking into right now, and we're working on, and we're moving forward on a plan for that.
The Culture, Heritage, and Archaeology Strategic Plan, I showed you a picture of. There's an English version and a Mi'kmaq language version. One of the top 5 priorities is having repatriation of Mi'kmaq archaeological remains back to the nation. So right now, yes, if it's in a provincial jurisdiction, it goes to the Nova Scotia Museum storage facilities. They have some at Summer Street, there's some in Stellarton, and then there are various sites across the province. And for Parks Canada federal jurisdictions, it goes to the Atlantic Regional Storage Facility in Woodside in Dartmouth. So those are the 2 storage places. But again, that is a high priority because that's what we were told is one of the top 5 priorities, and that is repatriation of Mi'kmaq archaeological heritage back to the nation. And that involves all sorts of infrastructure requirements as well. It's not just, back the truck up and dump all the artifacts off and here you go. I mean, you've got to have facilities, you've got to have resources, you've got to have systems to deal with that. So supporting development of all of that is part of the equation.
Thank you both. And I know that I said that was the last question, but we just got one more in that I think is a really, really good way to end tonight's session. And I think really you clearly demonstrated throughout your presentation, but this question is, how does having archaeologists employed at KMK help the Mi'kmaq?
Oh, geez.
No pressure.
Yeah. Well, I guess if I can hazard, it's kind of like, why do we need you? It's kind of a funny question to ask us to answer about ourselves, but I guess I would offer that, the work at KMK is about implementing rights, implementing existing rights. And we know that the legal arena has relied heavily in the past and will in the future on archaeological evidence. And every time an archaeological site is found or disturbed or damaged or destroyed and never known, that impacts Mi'kmaq rights. So making sure that archaeology is part of the conversation and the dialogue in consultation, making sure that the methods and the processes are diligent to ensure that nothing is lost, nothing is damaged. That speaks directly to implementing rights, as well as clarifying and settling those issues of title. We're talking about use and occupancy. For a long, long time, archaeologists have not been accountable to Indigenous peoples. So it's really important to make sure that Migamo are operating in all of the discussions that are required, whether it's through main table discussions or consultation files, that the playing field is equaled or equitable. And without access to knowing what archaeologists can and should do, and the devil in the details, it's not fair. So I think it's really important to have an archaeological component to all of those conversations that the KMKNO team is part of. I hope that helps answer your question.
It did, absolutely. So thank you again, both for your time and your information. As always, being a teammate, I appreciate it, but being a Migamo community member, I appreciate it more. So thank you both. Wow, I got a little too emotional over that. Thank you everybody for joining us and listening in. If you're watching a recorded, this session recorded later on after tonight's session, and you have questions that weren't answered, please, again, contact us. You can email us at info@migamorights.com. You can message us through our social media sites or through our website. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, our newsletter is also on our website that has more information about our archaeology department, as well as all our other departments at KMKNO. We hope you can join us at our next session. Our next session will be held February 24th at 6:30 p.m. and the focus for February will be on Migamo cultural tourism. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening, and we appreciate and love the fact that you joined us tonight. Thank you.